All right, well, it does look like we have a quorum, so I think we'll get started. First off, can I get a motion to open the meeting?
Moved.
All right, you have a motion. Can I get a second?
And seconded.
All right, and can I get a roll call vote? Mark Albers,
Aye.
Wasim Basili,
Aye.
Brendan Daly,
Aye.
Steve Leahy,
Aye.
Peter Galatano,
Aye.
and let's see, Dan Sickle has just joined the meeting, but I'm also just going to vote aye to open the meeting, and we can now officially open the meeting even without Dan's vote. So that's 7:02 p.m. This is the Sherborn Advisory Committee public meeting of Wednesday, January the 5th. Welcome everybody and Happy New Year. So first off, I guess first off, can I get a volunteer to take minutes? Anyone? Nobody?
I can do it.
All right, thank you, Steve.
Good.
That's all right. Leahy's got it. Wasim, your connection seems a little bit spotty.
Okay, if you don't mind, then I'm going to turn off my video. I'm sitting in the far side of the house, so
Sure.
bad reception here. Okay, I'll turn off the video.
All right, no worries. Okay, so all right, we've got Leahy is taking minutes. Great. So first, I'm going to read the agenda. So open meeting and roll call. Addition of topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair. I do not have any additional topics. Does anybody else have anything they want to add? I also want to note that Jane Matarazzo has just joined the meeting. All right, hearing no additions to the agenda. Oh. Whoa, Wasim, you're pretty.
You're gonna need to move.
Steve, are we going to do like liaison reports or no longer that?
I will. All right, and Natalie Weir has just joined the meeting. All right, sorry, again, any additional topics that anybody wants to add? All right, hearing no additional topics. After that will be liaison reports, followed by the FY23 budgets and we're going to take these a little bit out of order, just at the request of the treasurer, who I believe she anticipates having a lot of discussion on debt service. So she wanted to push that to the end so that the rest of you weren't waiting on her. Of course, everybody is welcome to stay for that discussion. So we're not going to take these in the order in the published agenda, but the agenda lists as treasurer, collector, finance, accounting, and town clerk. And again, instead, we're just going to put the treasurer at the end of the budgets. And then after that, we're going to vote on the previous meeting minutes. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about the agenda? All right. Hearing none, I guess we'll move on. First things off, liaison reports. Does anybody have any liaison reports?
Can you hear me okay, Steve?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, let's give this a try. So Mark and I scheduled a conversation with the chief of police, and so I just have kind of few notes from the conversation. Essentially, the bottom line is nothing unexpected in terms of the budget. So no big changes in terms of the budget this year. He is looking into some things that will potentially improve the improve things in the long term. So for example, there's a study through, I believe, the state 911, where communities can sign up and have a regional study done. I think maybe run by UMass or something like that. They do an analysis. They look at the call volumes they do, so the result of that is potentially see what's a good option for us in terms of dispatchers. Either having our own versus having, let's say, a regional common dispatch. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, Chief Galvin is right there. So, I'm just relaying the information. We've just never had a meeting after the conversation that we've had, Chief Galvin. By seeing that you're here, I'm just relaying some of the information. But again, the bottom line is nothing unexpected in terms of the budget this year. But some really nice ideas. I was very pleased, from the conversation, Chief. And some of the ideas that you're looking into in terms of how to improve the essentially productivity long term.
Great, thank you. Chief Galvin, welcome. Welcome to the town and welcome to your first appearance at an advisory meeting. But I wanted to give you the opportunity just because you're here and Wasim was discussing the police department. If you had anything you wanted to add, just keeping in mind that this is not an agenda item to discuss the police budget. Of course, you've got your own scheduled meeting in about a month or so, but if there was anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, just a little bit on the regionalization study. Obviously that's something we're very serious about. Both Chief Ward and the fire department and I have had some discussions about our dispatch service and what we can do to improve it. Actually, we're very fortunate. We were lucky to get in on the study that was being done with our neighboring communities, and we're actually going to have a draft report in 14 days. And have some more information very soon. So I'm excited about that. I don't know if that would lead to any changes to the budget for FY23, but we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens. But I'll have more for you if we do have more information. But really, I just wanted to come tonight to I guess figure out what I was going to be in for when I got to present my budget to you. Get to see how the process goes and learn a little bit about the process, just so I was better prepared for when I come to present to you.
Pain and suffering is usually the norm.
Yeah. I will warn you, of course, that your budget being significantly larger than the ones we're discussing today, you'll be under a bit more scrutiny probably. That's not to say that we're scrutinizing all of your budgets very closely. So
no, I wouldn't expect anything less. So.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, any other liaison reports?
Yes, there was a capital budget committee meeting last night. Dan, you want to take a shot at the liaison report? Because you were paying much more attention than I was.
Let me just grab my notes. Give me 1 second. I wasn't expecting that, Peter, but give me just a second.
Peter, you put him on the spot.
Well, he took notes. That's much better than I did.
I don't even take notes at my own meetings.
So it was kind of a general discussion about a host of capital budget issues. Heidi and Deb were there, talked about the debt service numbers that we're going to talk about later tonight and where that goes. And then there was a bit of talk about the guidance letter that's going to go out soon, within days, I think, to department heads about capital budget, both looking at this year and look ahead to see what's coming and to try to make sure that the look ahead is as current as it could be. The kind of new information added to the guidance letter relative to what it was last year is one, to just mention that there'll probably be more scrutiny on capital items this year than in some other years, given budget stringencies, the higher inflation and wage increases, rising debt service, and a host of other factors. So there was just a sentence added about that, and just a little bit added about the possibility of ARPA funding being a possible, unclear, but possible additional source of funding. I think there's going to be a meeting scheduled sometime in the next couple of weeks for advisory, select board, and the capital budget committee to talk about ARPA funding and how that process might go forward. I gather a member of the select board has some ideas about that and whether we would stick with the current process for approving ARPA funding or move to something a little bit different. And then we had a kind of a little off-topic conversation about possibility of a capital stabilization fund, and I think that's going to come up in Heidi's material later in the meeting, so I'm not going to say any more about that now. Peter, what did I miss?
You included everything.
Probably more than anyone needed.
No, that's very important because it does flow into the budget as a large number, the debt service, and we've got a prelude to that from Heidi, including all of the add-ons and the sources of funding being it short-term, mid-term, and long-term. We're planning to float a bond, and I'll let Heidi touch upon that. The interest rate environment that we're currently in does play a large impact because that the cost of borrowing will go up, thus the debt service will go up, chewing more of the budget than historically of the last 10 years, with interest rates being very low and getting very favorable interest rates. So those were all factors that may resonate in the guidance letter for capital. But then again, municipal financing, municipal debt is the most efficient way to fund long-term, long life, expensive assets. So we're encouraged to do that, and it matches the expense to the life of the piece of capital. And so we'll send out the guidance letter. I think the target was by the end of January, so that the departments have it. We know that the departments already have their wish list. This just provides a little background and color into the decisions that we'll all make as a town going forward.
Thanks. I wanted to also just piggyback on what Dan was saying about the meeting with select board and advisory and capital budget, and I'm not sure who else they're inviting to this sort of roundtable discussion about the ARPA funding and having an overarching plan. But I got a message from Diane Moores today saying that the select board is planning on doing this meeting on next Thursday, January the 13th. So in an ideal world, I think that me, Mark Albers, Peter Galatano, and Dan Sickle would all be there as sort of the chair, vice chair, and representatives from capital budget. If anybody else from advisory is interested in joining that discussion, can you please just let me know, because that would put us over a quorum. So I would just have to post an advisory meeting for next Thursday. So you're totally welcome to do it. Just let me know if you think that you would want to be part of that, and then I'll just post advisory for that night. All right, anything else?
Just a quick question, Stephen, that is part of the select board meeting, is it not? Just this
Yes.
round? Yeah, okay, that's what I just wanted to clarify, that it's not a special meeting, it's within the select board meeting.
It is within the select board meeting. Diane had mentioned that she was creating a room for it, so I didn't know if there was going to be a breakout room for that roundtable discussion, but it's not closed, it's not executive session or anything, so I didn't know how how the mechanics of that was going to go, but
okay.
And to add to that, what I hope to happen in that meeting is some of the discussions we've had about how to prioritize projects given the limited amount of ARPA money we have over the period of time that we have to spend it. Given that it's been a first come, first serve approach, to have a more formalized approach that can be vetted and evaluated and prioritized by multiple stakeholders. And I'm hoping that's where they're going. That's the consensus that we've talked about going forward. And I'll make sure, as well as others on this, in this meeting, at that meeting too. And they may have their own ideas on how to do it.
Great. And Peter, can you also just make sure that Joe posts a capital budget meeting for that night as well? Because you guys will almost surely be over quorum, I'm guessing.
Yes, so Jackie, who did our last posting for us for the capital budget committee? Who was the responsible adult to do that for us?
I mean, isn't Joe usually the one? Is Joe the chair?
Well,
Joe's the
Joe's
chair,
an
right?
adult, and I don't think he posted it, but I'm not sure.
Well, I'm sure that certainly between Joe and Corey, one of them should know how to post a meeting and get it
Well,
done.
Corey, yeah, I think Jackie did it, right?
Well, no, Joe posts the meetings. He posts the meetings online. The link comes over to the clerk's office and then we actually put it on the calendar. But
Yeah,
he's the
because
one
I
that
always have to,
initiates it.
I have to post the meeting and then Jackie just approves it.
All right.
Yeah,
Right.
you guys actually don't do anything. You just send us a link and we actually put it on the calendar. Until we put it on the calendar, it's out in limbo land.
I would object to that, but it's kind of true. We don't.
Okay, all right. Any additional liaison reports?
Just quickly, I got an email from Dave Goldberg in Recreation with a heads up that they're going to have a significant increase in their request for FY23. I think it has to do with field maintenance.
Okay.
So I don't know when do you know when we're meeting with Rec to talk about their budget?
Hang on, I can pull that up.
I thought it was January, is it the 12th or the 19th?
Yeah,
I got a similar call from Doug McDougall, who was asking me to, kind of hold off on their budget because he was out getting some information about what he thought it was going to be. And it was more of a field upgrade than a field maintenance, which might roll into a capital project, but I think their initial start was to put it in their operating expenses.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can discuss with them. They're on January 12th, so that's next Wednesday. But they at least they have not reached out to me to reschedule that. So as far as they also, I'm not. Yeah, again, Mark, can you just make sure that you get that reminder email out to next week's budget makers?
Yep.
By tomorrow, because they may just respond and be like, hey, can we just postpone it we already have multiple people who want to postpone their meetings, so the later meetings are going to be doozies probably, unfortunately. Okay, any other requests, liaison reports? All right, if not, then we'll move on to the budgets. And again, we're putting the treasurer at the end at the request of the treasurer. So I think that means the collector. Pam, you're up.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
I don't have
And-
anything to say about my budget unless you guys have questions. My only
Yeah.
increases are to salary, so mine's pretty good.
Let me.
And it's just the COLA. It's not anything else.
All right. Can everybody see this? I'm going to jack up the size a little bit here.
Thanks,
Can
Steve.
everybody read that? Okay.
Yep.
All right. I don't like how I always lose the it's funny. Usually I can see everybody's face still, but all right. Well, I'm going into audio only here. All right. So does anybody have any questions or comments about Pam's budget here?
I had one about, and maybe, well, Deb, maybe you can help us understand this as well too, because I think there was a notation in the accounting budget that said that there was an $8,000 increase or an $8,000 software expense, collector software expense, which had historically been paid from the collector's budget.
Correct.
But it didn't seem like there was a decrease in roughly that amount in the collector's budget. So I just wanted to better understand how that was being handled.
Yeah. If you look at Pam's budget right there, you see that line item 5321, and every the data processing, every year there's about, a 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. And then in FY22, there's no budget there. That, I guess it was decided that accounting was going to take responsibility for paying that when they switched to Vadar. So there's no budget for Pam, but it was not included in the accounting FY22 budget. And I think it was an oversight on Sharon's part last year. So when I was going through and I was trying to figure out, my numbers, all of a sudden I had an $8,000 variance, and that's the reason.
Okay.
So it should have been added last year and it just didn't get added in.
Correct. That's correct. I also, oh, go ahead.
No, Deb, go ahead, finish your thought.
Oh, I was going to switch subjects to salaries. So if you had any more questions about the software.
Not on the software, but the 22 budget is an estimate we had based upon all of the changes that are occurring, quarterly billing. The 23 budgets are based upon those estimates. How true, especially the line items for tax, printing and binding, which historically have been 2,000 or less, postage, which did have a significant increase, yet if we double up on the double invoices twice a year, we would be back to our biannual mailings. And then, so those two seem to have jumped last year's budget compared to the historic spend. And then we're carrying that forward in 23. Is there, since we're halfway through 22, are we running at budget for those line items, or are they still conservative and 23 is conservative? Printing, binding, postage.
We're not combining postage, whether we still have to print and mail out the bills. You do know that my budget is coming in under budget from last year, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Peter is just looking at these lines and just seeing the essentially comparing the FY22 and FY23 numbers compared with the actuals and the 3-year average, and just seeing that they are
Lower.
significantly high.
Low.
Yeah, it's pattern recognition, recognizing actual spends compared to two budgets, which we're halfway through the 22 budget, which is great, you're under budget. But then brings into question the 23 budget, whether those $5,000 figures are just placeholders or can they be brought down closer to an actual spend?
That's exactly what I did for my budget, was bring it down to closer what an actual spend would be. That's why the tax deputy collector is down $500 because we haven't been spending as much, so I took it down. Tax printing and binding, I took some out from tax postage and put it up there and took out like almost $2,000 because I'm going on what I'm actually spending now.
And that's with,
Wait, what do you mean you took out $2,000?
Postage was $7,300 in fiscal year 22. It's now 5,000.
Okay. Yes, but what about the printing and binding?
What about it? It's only up. How much is that up? Not a lot.
Yeah,
And
but
I took money out of here. So if you guys don't want me to adjust anything, then I could keep them the same. I'm trying to make it more towards the actuals, which is what I thought you guys wanted us to do.
yeah, we're not, Pam, we're
Yeah.
not, you're being very defensive right now. We're not trying
Oh, I'm
to
sorry. I don't
attack-
mean to be.
we're not trying to attack you right now. We just want to understand, because
Yeah.
if you look at tax printing and binding, the 3-year average is only $783.
Mhm.
And our most recent actual is a little under 2,000. And so we're
Mhm.
just wondering why for FY22 and 23 that number is up at $4,000 or $5,000.
Well, I think I'm
what's
just
the increase in
classifying,
cost?
sorry. I think
No,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
classifying them more into the categories that I think fit what they actually are. Binding, we only do every other year.
Okay.
Well, maybe, can I just ask what is in printing and binding? Because, with the billing, maybe you could just explain what's in that cost and why it's only every other year.
The binding is because I'm only required to print a bound copy of all the real estate commitments every other year. So I do 2 years at once in one binding. And, book binding is only $150 typically.
So
when
is
was
the
last
missing,
time you
Really, the
bought-
tax printing. So I did 4 quarters with 2 stuffers. The stuffers are like 10 cents a piece. So I did everything out for printing, postage, times it by the 4 quarters, and that was my number. The tax printing and binding is me printing off and the bills. And the postage is them sending the bills. So,
Now,
I mean,
isn't
really,
it-
it should just be combined into one, really. Because we don't really have too much postage other than sending out the tax bills. We do have the excise ones, and I order some envelopes, which go under tax postage. Because
Oh, Peter, you were really asking why it went up from, 2,000 to 4,760, right, year over year, and then why it's going up again another 800. That's really what you were noticing, right? The big
Right,
jump.
so if it's episodic, so if I see a pattern of 2000 and 2021, which was actual, I would assume that's the year we bound whatever we needed to bind.
the binding is $150, so it's not, it has nothing to do with binding.
may I interject here? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So isn't this the case of we moving to quarterly billing? And that's what the question is. The question is, why is there an increase in 22 and 23? Didn't we move to quarterly billing? Isn't that related, the increase?
Did that increase the
Is,
printing costs?
I'm just struggling with what the increase is when my budget overall has gone down for the tax
So-
printing and binding postage. That's kind of all one. That's kind of all one thing. Tax printing and binding and tax postage is me printing off the bills, mailing out the bills in envelopes.
Right. And
So-
I believe we're mailing a lot more now with quarterly billing than we were in the past when it was twice a year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
But
So we're
Oh, I
not
mean-
double stuffing in sending out only 2 mailings? I thought I received two invoices in one bill.
No, you received 4 last year and you'll receive 4 this quarter. There'll be 2, your actuals have what's due in February and what's due in May, but you'll receive another one for the 4th quarter.
Okay. So if we double the 2 line items, printing and binding and postage from 2021, which is 2,000 each to 4,000, assuming inflation, that'll be 5,000 for those 2 line items. Yet we're at 10,500, even after doubling and adding for inflation from the last actual year. So the budget for 22 is kind of a guess. The budget for 23 is based off of that guess. I'm going back to the real numbers and saying, okay, let's double the real numbers, the actual numbers, add some inflation, even add another 1,000, so that it would be 6,000. There's still a delta of 4,500 that I'm wondering about.
I
So
think, Pam, part of
we-
the confusion, I think, is that I think what Peter is asking about is the difference between FY 21 and then versus the sort of like the average of 22 and 23. Like we recognize that 22 to 23 is consistent, and in fact, you've decreased your overall budget. But I think
Mhm.
right now Peter is looking at FY 21 and being like, wait a second, why was there a jump in these lines collectively from 21 to 22, which is being carried over into 23? We just want to get an understanding of what is in those numbers and why they increased and are holding at the higher number. That's all.
Okay. I guess I don't understand where the jump from, why you think there's a jump to 23. 21, was kind of a, like you said, let's guess here because we're going to quarterly, right? So 22, we had more of an idea of what things were going to be. And now we're coming in and I'm coming in even less because I am going off of what the actual costs are going to be. And remember that this is my first kind of full budget season in this job with, trying to make the best cost decisions that I can. I switched printers. So we're doing, a lot of things to try to make this go down. And I think what would be more helpful is if I did combine a couple other things like the computer supplies and office supplies. I think I should do that for the printing, binding, and the postage because it's kind of all in one.
That would ruin the trend, so I would recommend not doing that. Even though it makes sense from a disbursement and purchasing. But what we do like to see is a consistent trend year over year from actuals that should be inflation or other added costs. And so the reason I go back to 2021 was that it's a closed year where there's actual costs. And then the 22, it's just a budget. And so if we were running at a 8,000.
And I came in under budget last year.
That's
Right.
Deb, do you have conveniently the run rate for these two
Yeah,
lines?
I do. So far, year to date for the printing and binding, it's $794. And the postage year to date is $749.
And
And that was only for the second quarter. The first quarter bill, they just mailed me, which I submitted today, Deb.
Oh,
So
yeah, I
that's
haven't
at
seen
least
that yet.
double. Yeah, that's at least double because I didn't get the July bill. So that's only for Q2, and we just mailed
Okay.
out Q3.
okay, so how many more mailings are you gonna have for this fiscal year?
Well, we have one more for the fourth quarter.
Okay. So if we can double the amount that you just listed, Deb, right?
Yeah, that's about 1,600.
Right,
Okay.
but then you guys have to include excise as well. There's excise bills that are in here, and there's envelopes that I purchase.
So double that again would make it 36 for those two line items. And you're under budget, which is great, which makes the baseline for 23 lower, which questions the 10,500 for those two line items. And again, it's just pattern recognition from actuals to
Yeah.
a budget and then another budget. So
Yeah.
we're trying to
Right,
bridge
and it's a new
the gap.
person in the job too, so
Yeah,
it's
Pam,
gonna be towards what, how I'm perceiving of what should be in what budget,
yeah, well, Pam, just for clarification, I'm not sure if you did the FY22 budget, but the guidance for FY22 budget was to flatline from FY21 budget. And, we
Mhm.
do this so early so that FY21 actuals weren't there. So FY22 budget just kind of rolled over, which now is rolling over to 23, which really isn't reflecting the actual. I think, isn't that the whole point? It's, I mean, at this point, just to correct what the actual should be and not keep flatlining it year after year after year.
Yeah, but I mean, I will say, I think that Pam isn't just flatlining it. I think you can see that the numbers changed from 22 to 23. So I think she's gone through and made an attempt to look at what she's actually doing, what she's actually using, and putting in numbers that she feels are accurate for that. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the fact that your overall budget has decreased by, well, your operating at least has decreased by almost 10%. I think that for us, at least, I think it's just, we want to get an understanding of what is actually informing these numbers, and getting an idea of how close to the actual are these going to be. And I think that Peter is bringing up a point that there's a possibility that you may still come in under budget on these numbers. And I think that that's something to keep in mind.
Wouldn't that be great?
That would be great. I would
Mhm.
suspect that we might need to get through FY22 actuals before we get an idea. Essentially for FY24, I'm hoping that we will have a much better idea of, with you running the department, how all of the different line items go. The thing that I would just set aside, these are fairly small numbers relative to our overall budget. But I suspect that a lot of different budgets are going to come in pretty high this year, because of operational changes, but inflation in general. So we may be going through and asking various budget makers if they can try to claw back some of their numbers. And I think based on the run rate so far this year and sort of the anticipation of what you have left to be printing and mailing, it's entirely possible we might ask you to bring these down a little bit later in the budget season once we get a better idea of where everybody else's budgets are at. Would you be open to that?
Not really, because I've already calculated out those numbers in my budget. So, it's interesting, like everybody says, don't come in under budget, don't come in under budget, just flatline it, just flatline it. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that this year because I'm also a taxpayer and I want my budget to reflect accurately what I think that I'm going to spend. but now I know why everybody says, just come in flatline. Of course, I'm open to it, looking at my 22 budget, but based on my calculations, I think that this is a fair and accurate budget for the collector's office.
Okay.
And I don't know who my rep is, but if my rep wants to come and meet with me and see my spreadsheets and my work of how I determined what numbers should go into that budget, I'd be happy to do that. I just don't think that probably should have been done before I presented my budget tonight for approval.
Yeah, that's fair. And just so you're aware, my plan, I'm not sure how well our 9-member board is going to carry through on it this year because it's hard. We're going to be scrutinizing everybody's budget pretty closely this year because of the fact that everybody's COVID budgets are pretty all over the place, because I think it's unprecedented what we've been going through. And I think we are kind of viewing this year as a potential sort of a reset year in terms of everybody's baseline to try to figure out, okay, what are you actually using? And so that's why I think we're going to be probably asking a lot of people, okay, can you tell us what exactly is going into these particular lines? Because I think the town's budget is about to go up a lot overall, and we're doing our best to try to keep it as much in check as possible. So you happen to be the first budget that we are looking at. So I don't want you to feel like we are picking on you. We're going to be picking on everybody. So.
Well, and I don't think it's picking on, like, you guys are doing your job. That's what you're supposed to do.
It's just, Pam, it just seems like if the run rate is 700 for the first 2 quarters, it seems
It's
like
not. There's other things in that budget item, like my envelopes that I buy, excise tax bills that get mailed out. We're just talking about real estate on this meeting.
Okay.
There's usually
Right.
8 to 10 commitments for motor vehicle excise that goes out of my office, that gets mailed out. That's included in there. And, we've only had 5 so far, so there's more to come. And so when I buy envelopes, it's all at a one-time thing. So those aren't in there yet. I will be purchasing envelopes.
That's not part of office supplies.
No, because they come with postage. They're pre-postaged because I get it cheaper that way, having the envelopes with postage. We've always done that.
Deb, you wanted to mention something about salaries before I
Yeah.
interrupt?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to kind of explain. I assume that everybody probably thought they were going to see a flat 4%. But if you've been on this before, you know that we run on a fiscal year and we have to calculate the salaries based on the number of days worked. And so we're working less days in fiscal year 23 than in fiscal year 22. And that's why it's not exactly 4%. And you're going to see that for every employee that doesn't have a contract.
I understand that for hourly employees, Deb, but why is that true for salaried employees?
Because we treat salary employees as hourly employees when it comes to calculating this, because their salary is based on like 5 days a week, if you will. So in that first week in July, they're going to get 2 days of salary at the FY22 rate based on an hourly rate, and then 3 days at the 23 rate. And some years it's 3 days, some days it's 2 days, and it just varies slightly. It's it's complicated because of the fact that we're on a fiscal year. But if we didn't do it like that, some years where we worked more days than other days, people would be working more days for no pay, if you will.
And council, have we ever gotten an opinion of council as to whether, treating salaried employees as hourly employees for certain purposes? I mean, you don't have to state, you don't have to talk about what that opinion is, but I'm hoping that that's something that council has opined on.
Well, yeah, that was, before my time, but I know that this is how we have done it for as long as I've been here, which is like 14 years, is calculating based on the days that we work, except for contract employees. So if somebody has a contract and it says for this year, they're making, $50,000, then they make $50,000. But salary employees their salaries based on an hourly rate, based on how many hours they are budgeted to work. So that's how we calculate their salary.
So Deb, then we should see consistency. The 3.6% number is what we should expect for
it'll
any salary that is increasing by the 4% rate.
Yeah, it'll vary a little bit, anywhere between 3.6 and I would say, 3.7, something like that.
But why would there be variability if the schedule is essentially the same for full-time employees?
Well, it's just rounding, basically. I mean, I really didn't look to see it's all 3.6, but the calculation is all the same for everybody. So it probably is close to 3.6. Like I said, I didn't really check.
Got it. Thank you.
If I may, Pam, I'm Steve Leahy. We haven't spoken before. I just want you brought up, you mentioned something that I needed to respond to. And I appreciate the color and kind of background of, the conversation between some of the department makers that says, don't come in under budget. That's helpful. When you mentioned that you're a taxpayer, as we all are, right? Everyone on this phone call. And the challenge, and you also mentioned that this is part of our job, right? When we take on this role in advisory, our job is to help advise the town citizens on how to vote on these budgets. And the challenge that I have here, and the part that I guess I want to make sure that you can at least hear at least my side, my version of those two particular lines, the printing and binding and the postage, right? Whereby you've net reduced the ask down to a total of about 10,500. But the challenge is, in the last 3 years, we're seeing the net spend is less than $4,000. And so,
Right, but
not that
remember,
many people bring it up at the cocktail parties or anything, but if someone says to me, hey, Steve, why do you advise we spend $10,500 on postage and binding this year when historically we spend $3,700, I would be at a loss. And so maybe,
because remember, we were semi-annual for 2 of those years that we're using the 3-year trend on.
okay, so we're semi-annual and now we're going to 4 periods. Okay. And so we're going to double some of those spendings, the postage, certainly. I just want to make sure we hear each other. I hear you. You don't want to cut your budget here at this point in time, even though the historicals are far off from what you're requesting.
Correct.
Can I bring up a point on one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
So when we order postage, because I have the same issue with postage, we're buying 4 to 6 boxes of these $500, 500 count postages. And it might be that at the end of FY20, we might have purchased this in June and have been able to get through most of FY21 without using the postage, and then had to go buy another slick. Sometimes that you're going to miss a year. So even though we went to quarterly in FY21, she had purchased all of the envelopes in FY20 potentially. and then gets hit again in FY22, sometimes because I know that when the postage was going up, there was a tendency to try and buy as many envelopes as you can at the old forever stamp price. So I,
Gotcha. So we don't see that expense in the year interim. I gotcha.
right,
Makes
no,
sense.
I
Right.
don't think you do, because I do remember when Nancy was there, she was buying a whole bunch of envelopes at that time because of the rate going up. And I remember kicking myself saying, oh, I probably should have bought more envelopes because the stamp price is going up. So that is a rate that I don't think you saw in an FY21 actual impacting that because the postage was already purchased.
Gotcha. And we were able to roll the supplies over. Okay. So
Yeah.
certainly that's a significant expense that wouldn't have shown up in 21.
No, you're looking at close to, $1,500, $2,000 at a purchase price.
And that's a big part of that budget. I understand. And thank you, Heidi.
Yeah.
And I am up for reevaluating this budget once I get more of my Q3, more of my 22 actuals in. And if I can come in and say that I can cut some more based on what these actuals are coming into to help out the town, I absolutely will do that.
Okay. Thank you for listening to me. And thank you for being open to that. I appreciate it.
Yes. And I don't know who my liaison is, but if they would like to come in and I can show them my breakdown of, how I came up with those numbers, I'm happy to do that. I just wasn't
Great.
prepared to do that tonight.
No.
Understood.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions for Pam's budget? All right, great. Then certainly for now, I think Pam, just leave your budget as it is. And if we are in a bad way and we need everybody to chip in a little bit at the end of the budget season, we'll come back to you. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you, Pam. All right. My screens always get all mucked up halfway through these meetings. All right, next we've got finance accounting. I'd say, because that's Deb, and you're gonna need to be here the entire time. So how would we feel about doing town clerk next so that Jackie can leave if she wants? Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
Jackie, is that okay with you? All right.
Yeah,
Yes, that's fine.
Clerk.
Okay, so do you want me to start or do you want to put my budget up?
Yeah,
on
you
the screen?
can start. I'm slowly
Okay.
working on getting your
So-
budget on the screen.
You guys probably aren't going to be happy with me because my budget is up. I did put down explanations on my spreadsheets on why. One of the reasons we want to start with I guess we can start with the town clerk budget. One of the reasons that the budget is up slightly is because of contractual services. So the town right now is doing a codification project, which we received a $6,300 grant for a couple of years ago. This is like a 3-year project through General Code is the vendor. And if you guys have been on any other town websites, when you go and look at the bylaws on the website, you can actually do a search for what you're looking for. So basically what the General Code, the codification project is going to do, it's going to put all of our zoning bylaws, our general bylaws, the Board of Health regulations, cemetery regulations, conservation, driveway, farm pond, planning board and scenic road regulations on the website that people can go in and actually just search. So everything gets recoded. And we'll have to vote at town meeting to have this done. But like I said, we got a $6,300 grant a couple of years ago. General Code is working on the program right now. I'm hoping to have it finished for town meeting in 2023. But fortunately, it comes out of my budget. Anything else comes out of my budget. So there's about $4,400 that are due, that 2,200 I can probably squeeze out of this year's budget, but then I'm gonna have $2,200 to pay most likely in February, in 2023. So that's why the budget is, I have $2,200 to cover that last fee, last payment in the town clerk contractual services. So that's where the $2,200 is coming up extra for town clerk, and that's because of the codification program project. And you guys might wonder, geez, the dog license fees, why is that? Why was that $4,129 in fiscal 21? The reason for that was because Steve Falk, who is a resident of Sherborn, managed our dog licensing program for free and did not charge us a dime, and did it for like 20 years. And it was time for Steve to retire, and I needed to go out to a traditional vendor. So we had to buy the initial contract in fiscal year 21. And now basically for the next 3 years, it's just like a maintenance fee that I have to pay to the vendor. And in addition to, you know, the dog tags, the mailer that we do, you know, all the postage that goes out, all of that. So that's where the $2,400, I'm very comfortable that I am going to come in at probably $2,300 and, you know, $78 this year. So I'm pretty comfortable that number will be flat. Postage has gone up, but I think somehow I can manage that even next year. So
Can we establish a dog warden and make it a volunteer position?
The dog warden is not paid out of my budget. That's the police chief.
Oh.
Okay, the dog licensing is for the green mailer that we do. You know, the tags that we have to buy. The light, you know, we have to have software to put it in. I mean, the police department, they're always asking for, you know, what tag number is a dog that we give them a list of all the owners of the names of the dogs, what the dogs are. We have to have software in there. I mean, we're required by the state to do all of this. So a lot of this is mandated by the state. So we have to have software to know who's paid for their dog license and who hasn't. So that's it for the town clerk. And then we'll do elections and the elections and registration when you guys are ready.
All right, so first, I guess just the things that I see that are different. Your town clerk professional stipend, I can see that you were budgeting closer to your actual trend. Like what, why was it up 3,000?
The stipend is always exact. It's not, that's whatever the stipend is what the stipend is. So whatever stipend I'm assigned is what I get. I don't get to ask for more money. There was an error, that professional stipend from 22, that was an error that Deb had pointed out that was done before she took over as finance director. Somehow it got the records access officer stipend got put in twice.
Yeah, it was
so it got
duplicated.
put into the town clerk professional stipend and also the records. So that 3143 is not correct. I will not be spending 3143. Finance will not put it through. It's actually 1143. So that $2,000 is going to be going back. I will not be spending that. That was an error that was put in by finance before Deb took over.
Well, yeah, it was a duplication.
Yeah.
Just what the stipends are for.
What are the stipends for? Professional stipends. So it's all the ethics training that I'm required to do by the state. You know, everybody that comes in, we monitor. Everybody is supposed to do the ethics training and send us a certificate. I am required by the state to actually do a running spreadsheet in case the state asks. People don't realize that. No one's ever asked me for it, but if you send, when you do your ethics training and you send me your certificate, we do track it. I don't babysit anybody on it, but the ethics commission could absolutely call me, and if there's a complaint about one of the election people or employees or committee board members, they could actually call me and say, has this person done their ethics training? And I would be able to tell them yes or no. So it's that, it's all the elections. Oh, well, this is town clerk. So it's ethics training. It's what else is it? Well, I can't think right now, but it's ethics, and there's something else in there that I'm required to do by the state. So that's what, and then the records access officers, because I'm the record access officer, and trust me, I spend a lot more hours than $2,000 on it.
I've got another question, which is probably too little too late because it's more for this year than FY23, but obviously meetings and seminars, travel, lodgings, travel out of state was all zero in FY21. Do you anticipate using any of that money this year? Or
Yeah, we've already started using it. I'm surprised that it's, I'm surprised that some of it hasn't come off yet. Yeah, I mean, we've already been going to some meetings. I might have put them in under elections and registration instead, depending on what the meeting was.
No, Jackie, this is just the FY22 budget you see here.
Oh,
Your
okay,
FY22
yeah, right,
actual
right,
spending.
yeah, you're right. No,
Yeah.
I have used that, or I
Yeah,
have
okay.
used some of the money
Yeah,
already.
she's spent already $280 on travel and seminars and stuff like that.
And town
Okay.
clerk, and then
Yeah,
on the elections,
in town
I've
clerk.
spent some too. And we have we've got another meeting coming up in February that I'll be putting through the bills for that tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm not spending the night or anything. I'm trying to keep it low. So I'm not using any of this on hotels. It's basically the meetings, and they make us pay for our lunch and all that other stuff, and
Okay.
the mileage. And I'm bringing, and now that I have a new assistant town clerk, I'm bringing, Megan is coming with us, and if it's appropriate, Tony is going as well.
Okay. Great. Any other questions for Jackie? All right. With nothing else, I think that's all we have for you. Thanks, Jackie. Actually, no, we're going to do elections next, right?
I have elections. I'm not done.
Yeah. All right. Let me get the. All right. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the 22 budget was one of the off years for elections and registration, because we only had the town meeting and the annual town election. The 23 budget encompasses the September state primary and then the governor's race in November. So that is 2 extra elections, which are very expensive. And so I added in, so that's $4,000 basically in the contractual services budget to cover that. I unfortunately, the state could come back and pay for some of this, but and again, you're looking at the legislature and they're very slow to decide. So unfortunately, I have to plan that it's got to come out of my budget. You would not believe how expensive it is to have an election. Just the chips alone for the ballots are like $1,100 or more for the machine that we are required to use for anyone that's handicapped. It's like $1,100 for the regular machine. It's about $1,000 for the police. So it's not cheap. And I could get, the state could pay for some of it, but it's very random. There's no consistency in whether or not they're going to help the municipalities pay for that. So I have to plan for that. The other increase in line was about $300 in the census. Unfortunately, I just found out when I reached out to our normal vendor for the census that the guy that does it retired. And so I had to get a new vendor, and they are a little bit more money. Also, the postage is a little bit more money. Everybody should be getting their census within the next couple of weeks, but unfortunately that is something, again, that I'm required to do by the state. And unfortunately it's a little bit more money for that. The other increase, let's see, what else? It's primarily elections, yeah, the contractual services, and then the census budget. So also, just to let you guys know, the annual town meeting last year cost $5,300 to do the electronic clickers, but that was voted on by the town, that the townspeople wanted it. And we had 525 people attend that town meeting last year. So I do think the electronic clickers are very valuable, but it is really difficult to try to predict how many clickers I have to order. And we do have to pay for them to fly in to run the program and stuff. So it's not cheap, but that $14,000 does include, you know, the renting of the clickers and having the vendor come out and run the program for us at town meeting.
Can I ask, slightly off topic, but since we're talking about town meeting,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that by having the clickers, we are attracting more people to show up, more citizens show up and actually take part in town meetings? Because that helps justify the cost in my mind.
I think that everyone likes the clickers. I don't know. I think it's actually the warrant articles that are forcing people to go. And it does make things run a little bit more smoothly, especially if we have close votes. I mean, it was voted by the town that the people wanted it. I don't necessarily, Mary and I don't necessarily have to use them.
I think it makes town meeting go faster, which is
it does make town meeting go faster.
To me, that's
and
pretty
it's more
critical.
and it's more accurate, especially when you've got 2/3 votes. It's more, you know, so a lot of the towns are using them, but like I said, it's not something that we have to do, but it, you know, even with the clickers, the town meeting was 3 hours.
Jackie, Dan Sickle here.
Mhm.
On the clickers, if assuming that we use clickers for the town meeting this year, similar expense, or because we've already got the clickers, it's less, or what are they rented every year? What
We rent them.
Work?
We
Okay.
rent them. It would be about $30,000 to buy them. So we rent them. And believe it or not, last year I was panicking because Mary Wolf and I work very closely together to try to plan town meeting in terms of how many people we think are going to attend. And normally it's not a big deal, but the last 2 years have been really difficult because of the COVID protocols that we've been forced, you know, I mean, to be safe for everybody with the 6 feet. And so we just we have never, in like 20 years, I think, have we had 525 people come to town meeting. We're normally, I've been in the clerk's office for about 7 or 8 years. And every town meeting that I've gone to previously is like, oh my God, do we have a quorum? It's 5 to 7 and we only have 70 people here. The quorum's 100. What are we gonna do? So we normally, it's like 230 people at the most that show up. So I had ordered, we have to pay for the clicker. So I don't just automatically order 500 clickers. I ordered a lot less than that. And then when Mary was like, oh my God, there's like 475 people that said they're coming to the meeting, I was on the phone with the vendor going, you need to get me another 250 clickers like right now, and I need them by tomorrow. So it was pretty crazy. So, you know, we're going to continue, I think, to do the survey because it is very helpful to get an idea. And I don't know what the warrant articles are this year. You know, I might be able to get it down a little bit more if I don't have to order 500 clickers. You know, if I can order, you know, 300, then I'll save like $1,000 or something. But
basically, it's an ongoing expense.
yes.
And then one other question, different topic.
Mm-hmm.
On the possible state reimbursement for election expenses, is there something special about these elections or new requirements that would make the state likely or more likely to reimburse? Or is it just that sometimes for state elections, they decide to sprinkle some money around and reimburse, and sometimes they don't?
Right. Well, sometimes so what happens is that they have been paying, reimbursing us for the early voting portion. And that's another subject that we can go, that I can mention to you guys. But it's basically the paying for the chips, the memory cards that go into the image cast machine that I have to, you know, there was when I looked back at all the history trying to figure out, you know, how much each election would cost, because I know what the general costs are, there was no rhyme or reason whether, like for the March presidential primary, we paid for the chip. Well, that didn't make any sense. But then the November election, we didn't pay for the chip. Like I called elections and said, I'm trying to figure out my budget. There's no rhyme or reason to this. And they said, yeah, we have no idea if we're going to pay for the chips or not. It's a legislative issue. And, you know, the legislature decides at the very last minute what's going to happen. So, but I can tell you that I did lose $8,200 of money that was reimbursed to me that unfortunately I did not know was there. And when Deb came on board as finance director, she found it and called me about it, but unfortunately the auditor said it had to go back into the general fund. So I lost $8,200 just last year, a few months ago, that went back into the general fund that was reimbursements for election expenses from the state.
Okay, thanks.
So,
very helpful.
There's a little cushion there.
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie, is there any benefit? Is there any benefit of partnering with Dover? I know they use an electronic counting system also to try to get the cost down with greater purchasing power.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we bought them, but then that would I
Even
don't
renting
know.
them,
I could talk to them and do that. I don't know. I could talk to.
Do you know if they use the same system as we do?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't even know. Do they use the electronic? I haven't spoken to Felicia, the town clerk, about that. So we do speak on occasion about a lot of different things, but I'm not sure if they use the same vendor. I don't know if they've done that before.
I do know they use the electronic
They do.
device. It may not be feasible because of dates and but it's worth.
Well, we would have to buy
asking.
them. There wouldn't be any other way.
Well, even to rent them.
We would have to buy them and then share them with Dover if that was possible. We could not, because once they're rented, we are required, when the town meeting's over, we have to send them back within like a week, or they start charging us. So I have to send the clickers back to the vendor.
Yeah, so for that to work, then our town meeting and Dover's town meeting would have to happen at like the same time.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
So
I
I
mean,
was actually,
if we purchased them with Dover and shared them, then that would be, then it wouldn't matter. As long as our town meeting, they would definitely not want to be on this, the same schedule. But if we
Yeah.
purchase them, but renting, it isn't gonna work for sharing.
And I assume if we purchase, we don't have as much flexibility in being able to get more, or, if we need more. Would that be true?
We could probably rent additional ones if we purchase them. But again, like I said, I believe it's like $30,000 to buy them, buy like 500.
Yeah, I feel like
of them.
the electronic voting committee or working group, whoever, actually Wasim, weren't you on that? I think they probably did a financial analysis and determined that buying them wasn't not actually cost effective.
right, yes. So we looked at the different options, even explored the option of, do we buy and share with Dover or other municipalities? And the problem there is even when you buy the clickers, it's not just a matter of buying them, but who is going to maintain them, make sure the software is updated from year to year. When you rent them, that is all taken care of. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And there's a cost certainly to the clickers, but also there's cost associated with someone, a representative from the vendor coming and helping us during the town meeting, right? So that's a large part of the cost as well. Depending on how spread out the area is. So if you're in a smaller auditorium, there's less cost because you can have one router or gateway. If you're spread out over a significantly larger area, then you're out of range for one gateway and you'll need more, and that increases the cost. So there are just too many of these things that factor into it. But okay, I'm maybe digressing here. To the question of buying versus renting, there were really the who's going to maintain it, who's going to manage all the software updates and everything related to that, making sure before town meeting, do we want someone spending, days making sure all the batteries are working and all of that? I mean, that's also a cost. All right. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think that is a yes. I have one last question, Jackie, and I know this has been explained in the past to me. I don't remember if it was you or if it was Carol Marple, but with the salaries, the budget's always a little bit higher than actual. And is that because some number of your election staff choose to volunteer, but you don't
Yes.
actually know,
Yes,
right?
correct. Yes.
So that explains why your actual always, I mean, your budget is always higher than whatever your actual trend is.
Yes, because I don't know who's going to want to get paid and who's, I mean, I can cut that down if you guys want me to, but I never know who's going to get paid and who isn't. And,
but the number that you budget reflects paying every temporary
Yes.
elected worker that you, okay.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And then I have to plan for the early voting as well, especially for this election. And the state will probably come back and reimburse for that, but it doesn't go back into my budget. It goes into another fund, which I will be in close contact with Deb this time to make sure that I don't lose that money.
All right. Any other questions for Jackie regarding the elections budget? All right, hearing none, then now I believe that you are done, Jackie.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, back to my agenda. All right, so now finance and accounting, Deb. Let's see, do you want to do finance committee first or accountant first? You're muted, Deb. Deb, you're muted.
Yeah, the finance committee one would be an easy one to check off the list.
Okay.
That's actually your folks' budget.
Oh yeah, that's
and-
us.
Yeah, so it really, I just plugged in there $4,000 as that's the budget for FY22 is $4,013. The 3-year average is $3,667. There was the pop in FY21 was because you had 2 town meetings in 21 and only 1 in FY20. So that was the whole, reason, but it's pretty straightforward. You used to budget for an for a clerk, but
Yeah.
you haven't had a clerk for a long, long time.
We had one last year.
Where
she
did
got
they
paid,
get
right?
paid? They
I
didn't
think
get
she got
paid.
paid. She should have gotten paid $513.
Unless it came out of the selectmen's budget, but there was no payroll charge to this budget last year.
Oh, really?
Right.
Can you check with Jeannie Guthrie on that?
Sure.
Because we
Who-
did. It was Allery Brach.
Oh,
She was our former conservation agent.
yeah.
But I got her to take minutes at the public hearing. So I would suggest that we budget again for it, because unless somebody from advisory wants to volunteer to take minutes at the public hearing, I think we should plan on attempting. I don't know that Allery wants to do it again because it was not a fun job. But we can try. I'm blanking on her name, but there was somebody who used to do it for us. I don't have her name at the top of my on the tip of my tongue, but anyways, I think we're going to try to get somebody to take minutes at the public hearing.
Alrighty.
So we should probably budget whatever 513 plus 4% is.
Okay.
And I suppose, yeah, just try to find out from Jeannie. Number one, make sure Allery got paid, and then she didn't say anything to me about not having been paid.
Yeah, and because it was Allery, it might have actually gone to the conservation budget if it wasn't,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll take a look, but
Yeah. So just make sure. Yeah. So just find out.
yeah, I can do that.
But yeah, I would just put 513 plus another 4%.
Alrighty.
As long as everybody else on advisory is okay with that, because otherwise we don't have anybody taking minutes at the public hearing. And I did that 2 years in a row, and it was not fun. Okay, otherwise I have no issues with our own budget. Anybody else from advisory?
No.
All right. Now let's go to accountant.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with salaries. And what I did for the salaries, you'll see that there was an increase in the payroll and benefits coordinator. Debbie Reynolds has been there for a long time, and she actually got a pay bump for fiscal year 22, which was not in the budget. So once that pay was bumped up, then it increases for the fiscal year 23. So that's what's reflected there. And for the accounting permanent part-time, which is the accounts payable, it's the assistant town accountant, I reduced the hours by 5 hours. We're kind of in a state of flux right now. Since Sharon left last year, I don't really have anybody in that role. I've been doing that job with the help of Jeannie Guthrie, and Amy Davidson, they chip in, you know, a total of maybe 10 hours a week or something like that. So we know we can do with less hours. We don't really, because we don't know who the finance director will be or who will be the assistant accountant. I hate to reduce it too much more, but there is a little bit of wiggle room there. But I did reduce it by, you know, 5 hours for the budget for fiscal year 23, which reduced, you know, decreased the budget by $9,400 there. So that's this, you know, there's, it's not a decrease in salaries, but it's less than the 3.6% increase. As far as the accounting for the data processing, as we mentioned earlier, there, if you look at the history, you can see that it averages, you know, $39,000, and that's what's in the budget for this year. But that does not include the $8,000 that we pay for the collector's data processing to Vadar. So I pretty much kept it flat with the addition of the extra $8,000. For the annual audit, every other year we have to do an actuarial study, and FY23, that will be the year for that. And that runs at about $8,000 as well. So that was the increase there. And for the consulting services, this past 2 years, we've been using Clifton Lawson Associates. And especially this year, I'm using, her name is Hannah York. Just with any questions, I have about an hour to 2 hour call with her every other week, maybe every 3 weeks. And she's just answers some of the questions. She's been very helpful in filling out all the DOR forms and all that kind of stuff. So I really think that that's money well spent, especially given the flux of, we don't know what the accounting department's going to look like at this point for next year. So I thought that was money well spent. And then the other, you know, line items are pretty much the same as they have been this year.
Postage went from 1,500 to 0. What happened there?
Yeah, well, that's one of those things where it's been a line item in the budget for the last 3-4 years, but we have a postage machine up on our floor, and that is being paid for by town buildings. So we actually don't incur the expense. It's incurred by town buildings. I mean, we might have to buy some stamps here and there, you know, stuff like that, but it really is immaterial.
Okay. You had mentioned that the payroll and benefits coordinator, that she had gotten a pay bump, but that's only being reflected in FY23. So is that is the current year number 62,278? Is that incorrect?
Yeah.
Like, is she actually getting, okay, so she's actually
Yeah.
getting paid more than that this year?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to be, for FY22 budget, her salary line is going to be over, but we're going to be way under in the 5120 line item.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
Deb, I have an operational question. Has Vadar functionality and distribution continued to progress the way it has in the past, where large departments can use the functionality of Vadar in running reports, entering their budget? And is that decentralization and distribution of that function still occurring?
It is. All the departments are entering their own payables, which is, I shouldn't say all the departments, all the large departments are. Some of the remote departments like elder housing and school and recreation, we enter their payables for them, but all the other departments are entering their own, and then we just review them and everything else like that. And they are running their own reports.
So they get real-time budget variance reports through the month?
They can, you know, I don't know how often people are actually looking at them. I mean, at the end of every month, I do send out, the PDF file to you folks and everybody else, but all the other departments should be able to look at them at any given time during the month if they choose.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. It's good.
Hey Deb, can I, we have understand, so in your footnote number 3, the $8,000 of collector software, which had historically been paid from the collector's budget, up until, do you know when that stopped being taken from collectors?
Well, they paid for it in FY21.
Right.
And then they didn't budget for it in FY22. So
Yep.
in my actual budget, I already paid for it for this year, but it's not reflected in my FY22 budget number.
Okay. So you just found a way to eat it. Okay.
Well, my budget's going to be way under this year because we're down a person.
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. Okay. So really though, up through fiscal year 21, so through the end of fiscal year 20, we should have seen that $8,000 in collector's budget, and then that should have dropped in 2021 because you're picking it up.
No, they paid for it in 21.
Sorry, they paid it in 21, so we should see
Yeah.
that drop in 22.
Yeah. And I wasn't privy to all the conversations, but I think it had to do with, they used to always use point software and now they're using Vadar. And since we pay for Vadar in the accounting budget, they must have made the decision to pay for it out of the accounting budget as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions for Deb?
Deb, just to make sure, so the permanent part-time, right now, that is not occupied, right? So essentially, this is reduced the hours by 5 to how many? So this is 35 now?
And no, it was that was a 30-hour, a 30-hour a week position, and now it will be 25 hours a week.
Oh, I see. 25, and that 25 is split among a number of people right now, essentially.
Yeah, and we haven't had anybody work 25 hours a week. The most we've had anybody work in that role has been probably 15, maybe. But that's requiring a lot of extra work on my part, to be quite honest.
All right. Any other questions? All right, then I think that covers finance and accounting. All right, so now we are up to the treasurer. All right, let's see here. And I know Heidi you have several things, but let's just start with the treasurer's budget.
Sure.
Let me get that on screen here.
So essentially it is flatlined across on everything but salaries. There will be some postage increases, but it would be about $100 or so. So I've just kind of left it to try and just meet your guidance, because usually there's some other items like the meeting ones. I've only had to go to one meeting this year so far. I don't know if we're going to have the other ones, but we're hoping to do more. So there will be room in that budget to eat up the extra postage cost. And legal right now is over budget because we've had some tax title accounts moving through land court, and we are getting hit with legal bills. We just will not know exactly when they come in. So if I think I'm running right now at like $4,300 spent on legal this year. But if there are any other questions, I think otherwise it's pretty straightforward.
Just looking sort of just very big picture again, like we've been doing with the other budget makers, when we compare your FY22 and 23 budgets against the 3-year averages, the budget is a bit higher. Now, if we look at FY21 actual, you're actually pretty close to that, but I just wanted to get an idea of, like, when we go into these individual line items, are these still accurate numbers for how you're actually spending this year and what you anticipate next year? Again, I haven't looked at your run rates this year, but
yeah, and I guess if we look at FY20 actual, if you want to look at that compared to where the budget is on some of the items, legal seems to be the biggest shift that comes up and down, and postage. Because again, if we buy in batch, it depends on when we're placing the orders throughout the fiscal year. You know, you will have a $1,600 bill that comes through, and depends on the part of the year that comes in. Supplies go up and down depending on if you need a computer or some other printers. And travel is the meals and lodging, and travel is the only one I can see where I have wanted to get to some of the meetings and have not been able to in the last couple of years since I started. So I keep hoping that I'm going to make the 2 meetings a year, and right now I've been making 1.
what are the advertising / bank fees and disclosure costs, which seem to be trivial previously and now are collectively about $3,000?
Right. So the banks have said they were going to start charging for some of the services. And right now they had sent the bills out, which is why we put in 700, because they had said they were going to be charging a monthly fee for certain access to the old data banks on the checks. But I had since talked with them. That seems to be coming down off of one bank, and I'm hoping that the other ones don't follow suit. So that's a number we might be able to come down on a little bit on the 700. But I'm not sure yet how that's going to play out in this scenario. Disclosure costs, that had been a line item that had been, I have in debt service as well, and I want to start moving it over towards the treasurer budget. We've had to use that. We have to report annually on our bonds now, and they've been charging us $2,200, which had not been in the budget before. But that's what it costs for our financial advisor every year to file with, I'm not sure what the banking organization is, they file a national organization that we have to fill out annually. If we do a long-term bond issue, sometimes that has been included. But it previously hadn't been in the budget. And it's kind of a new SEC requirement of how they've had to do the reporting in the last 2 years.
Okay. You had mentioned when office supplies that it fluctuates because you might need a new computer or printer. Moving forward, if we have an IT department and those types of purchases happen through the IT department, do you think that in the future that's a line that would be more consistently lower? I think it's fine to keep it at 1,000 for now, but I'm just wondering about what to expect in the future.
I think you can get down to, it looks like I was, 900 or 700. Those are years where I did not have a hardware purchase. So you'd get a little lower.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for Heidi about this, the treasurer's office budget? All right. If not, let's move on to, let's see. Do you want to do debt service now?
Yes, might as well look at that budget.
And I know, Heidi, you had sent me several sort of supplemental documents right before the meeting. So let me know if you want me to pull any of those documents onto the screen.
Sure. So the debt service budget, the majority of this budget is made up of long-term fixed costs of the bonds. So we have a 2013, 15, 18, and 20 of long-term bonds that are fixed costs that we can't do anything about. I'm looking next year to convert. We have about $5.3 million right now in short-term borrowings out there that we're looking to do a long-term bond conversion in August. How that would affect this next year for the budget is there will be a principal payment and interest payments due. So that is figured here, listed as a 2021 interest and budget line, which is a significant portion. And that's what's driving up the budget from 1.3 last year to 1.79 this year. The interest rates were extremely low on the bands of short-term borrowing. So that's why we're looking at only 24,000 on there. If we take out another band next year, that interest rate will not be due in FY23. So that's why there's no other new amounts there unless we do a less than a year borrowing, which we did do this last year, but that's unlikely. The other costs you're seeing, issuance costs. It costs about $70,000 to $75,000 to issue a long-term bond, or I found out as well as if you issue short-term borrowing that's over $3 million. It's because you have to go through legal counsel to vet it. You have to go through printing, and there's several other fees involved that come out to about $70,000 to $75,000. A lot of times, if you get a premium, a bond premium with it, that premium helps offset those disclosure costs. And we did get premiums in the FY18 and FY20 bonds. So the budget amounts were not needed in that line item. But when I did this last recent ban, which was requiring issuance costs, we did not get a premium on it. We actually got a lower interest rate, which was nice. So our net costs were better to choose that option. So because I haven't used that line item in the other years, I decided to kind of split them out in half, and I'm putting 36,000 down. That because the feedback is I've been under budget last year by $160,000, which because we were able to refinance the 2007 and the 2010 bonds and save $140,000 because of the interest rates, which that was unforeseen a year ago to know that was going to be possible. So I'm trying to listen to you to not tax people on it, but I still have to keep some placeholder because we may not get a premium. It's not guaranteed when we go out for a bond. And,
A couple questions, if I may. So when we do short-term borrowings ban, is that just a one-time payment at the end of the borrowing period? There's no interest payments in the middle. It's just it's like a discounted rate that we're doing.
We only pay an interest. So we pay an issuance cost, which is if normally our bans have been about $1 million to $2 million, and the issuance cost to do that is cheap. It's $600, and then you pay your interest rate on top of that. Once you start getting over the 2 million and you start hitting 3 million, you have to go through the whole full disclosure. Everything has to be vetted through bond counsel and get legal letters on each item in order to have someone bid on it. You sometimes get better interest rates. Like this last one, the over $3 million, our interest rate was 0.29%. It was kind of and it was, the weird thing is the bank that bid on it, the money market, they're paying me 0.35% on the money. So just a freak thing that's happened. The bids I'm seeing right now, the interest rates are going back up, not huge, but they're creeping. Peter asked last night, what we expect for next year, if we're going to be doing the bond in August. I expect they're going to be higher than this year. I don't know what level. That the feds are saying there's going to be 3 increases next year. I don't know when they're going to have the 3. I still think it's going to be favorable compared to the 2018 bond. I think we'll still be in a good interest rate. We're just not going to see what we saw in the 2020 bond. That was a really nice year and nice opportunity to refinance off some things. But I still think it's worthwhile to try and long-term bond a bunch of the big ticket, we're sitting on $5 million in short-term borrowing. If we can lock in those rates over a longer period of time, I think that would be in the town's interest.
So just follow up, A, I agree with what you were just saying. And B, sorry about the third rail here, but of that $5 million or so, is that taking into account anything about the library? And
Yes, so I have some other documentation I sent to Steve. And Steve, there is a sources and use document I think I gave to you on there. I don't know if you're able to bring that up.
Yeah, let me see here. Is
Estimate, is it August 22 estimated?
Yeah.
So I had our financial advisor back in November run through what items we'd be looking at bonding and what would be in a bond. And so this document shows the items, most of the items that we have right now in the short-term borrowing. The difference is in Pine Hill, I've only put $1 million in it right now to long-term borrow because it's unknown if we're getting an earmark. And this is the problem I've got with some of the borrowings, that with, you can't long-term bond if you're going to be getting any money back. So we need to find out if this earmark is really going to happen or not. And then also what the final cost is on Pine Hill. Right now, we short-term borrowed 1.6 something and change for this. And I think that we probably came in around 1.4 something million completed costs. I'll get that from Sean when he gets the final numbers going, but we'll be under 1.6 million. So just in this scenario, just to do a budget estimate, I put in $1 million. That number could go up. And in the library in here, we currently have a short-term borrowing out for 1.6 million. I have the full 1.6 million in it, because I am not sure that we're done with borrowing for that yet. But does that answer your question, Steve, of what you were looking for?
yep, it does.
Okay. And on the short-term borrowing, I didn't borrow everything for what was approved on the ATM 21, like town buildings or some of the roads, because we were not going to be actually starting work on it. So, but by next August, we should be able to borrow. And that's in here.
Heidi, what will be our outstanding debt next August 2022?
Our outstanding total amount of debt?
Principal. Yep.
Okay, so on another,
So that's like the ski slope where we're paying down the old, it seems we've retired everything up to 2013 from the previous schedule. 2015 seems to be the oldest bond we have out there.
right, Steve, can you bring up the one that's the DLS schedule I had sent? I think that would show what Peter's looking for. I think it says maybe DLS chart and has a yellow on it. Yes. So Peter, this shows our long-term bonds on the top. And in the yellow is what I projected, put in the estimate of the 2021 that we had for working numbers. And it goes out and shows you where those bonds end. It's out to FY31.
Okay. So I'm looking at the sum of the principal line for each of these. So you sent that out, I can calculate it if that was distributed to everyone.
I only had sent that to you and Mark and Dan at this time, because I wasn't
Okay.
sure if this is, I don't
No,
want to overload people.
That's fine. I know I did it a few years ago when the consultant came out and provided that information, and I just want to refresh it. And this is the information to refresh.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a total just for principals. I have them listed both in a total down below.
Yep.
And this includes nothing new that capital might be showing. This does not have, we know we have a couple million in school roofs coming up in the next couple of years that'll be adding on here, but it kind of gives you an idea of, when the 2013 is going to end and when the 2015 is going to end.
Do we know anybody on this call or the liaisons, the school liaisons, are they anticipating any roofs this year across any of the schools?
I don't believe so. I have to go back to my notes, but I'm pretty sure not. I thought those were all pushed out one more year.
Okay.
We'll look at school. We're looking at capital budgets for the two schools, Region and Sherborn.
Yeah.
I'll double check that.
And the bottom of this page, this is just, the DLS has this template that I've been using to fill in, and the bottom is just shows me within a year when I'm making the payments, because when I came on, all debt was due in May and November, interest and then principals. And because we're now on quarterly, I'm trying to stagger and move them off, get some payments off so that it's a little more even throughout the year for a cash flow basis. So that's just for my records of what I keep.
Have we solved the cash flow crunch of years gone by?
Very nicely.
So moving to quarterly billing for 49% of the populace who voted against it, that move to quarterly billing solved a huge issue that we had for at least 3 years in a row.
It really did. I don't run out of money right now. We see a cyclical dip, it comes up and going, but it's nothing like it was. I don't have a August, September time where we're kind of pulling out our hair and worrying about when the bills are coming in.
And we're able to pay that July 1st huge payment and get the discount.
Yes.
Which put us into a hole previously.
Well, right, it was paying up front of money we hadn't collected yet. Yeah.
Very good.
So it's not great news on the debt service with the numbers, but
No, it's not great.
no, but unfortunately, this is kind of what it is, and this is the reason why.
Heidi, what's the driver of the interest payment, the 2021 interest payment of 148,000?
Is it on the 2021, you said? Oh, I see, on the FY 2021, that one. That is because when we do it, it's going to be set up, and I think if you look down below, you can see where I put it on the bottom up, where the payments are going to come out. You'll see that we have a payment that'll be due in May, and then principal and interest is going to be due in November. So the 148 is the two interest payments of the 100 and the 40. So when we go out for the bond in August, the first payment is going to be due in November. Second payment is going to be due in May. Does that answer?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Sure. And I didn't put the interest, I just put the total amount of interest and payments on for the 2021 because this is all just estimates.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah.
About the debt service?
If not on that, then I did want to bring up the concept of a capital stabilization account. This is a concept that I've kind of thought about since I've become treasurer, and I would really like the group to consider the idea and maybe take a small group to study and look at it. I don't know, Steve, if you can bring up what I sent on for a scenario for a capital stabilization account. And I was looking at it to be something that could fund items, smaller items under 100,000. And how it would work is that the town meeting would vote to fund from free cash a certain amount every year. I mean, should we get a bumper year or something, you could put more money into it. And then in 3 to 5 years, have this be a source where instead of voting certain things from free cash each year, if free cash was available and we funded this, maybe the police vehicles could come from here on a rotating basis. I had looked kind of over the last several years and the police radios, we've had DPW small equipment, we've had fire department scuba equipment, Pine Hill HVAC had been 16,000. There were a lot of small items that we borrowed that I felt it might actually be more prudent to consider funding. So I had a scenario where I looked at the police vehicles that are 99,000. There were 3 ways to fund it. We can use free cash, we can borrow for 5 years useful life, or use capital stabilization fund. And I don't know if you have the next one I had of the police cruiser. Steve, if you can bring that one up, that shows if we borrow it, what happens to it, because once borrowing was low, that's great, but borrowing's starting to creep up. So I think it might be time to say, what do we do when interest rates settle back to a norm? So, and this is a debt service of what would happen if we put the police cars in an August one. And if you go down partway down the page, you can see that the $99,000 that it costs that we voted for will end up costing the town about $120,000 by the time you've got the interest and everything weighted in. So if we did if we did a capital stabilization fund and we put 100,000 from free cash into it, it would have some earnings because it's a trust fund. It would go through so that it might actually be more cost effective to use the interest that we're earning to pay for items like this than borrowing, at least for some of the smaller items, and really use that the bonding becomes for our bigger ticket, longer term items that should be spread out over everyone. So it's just something I wanted to bring up and see if there's interest to do this. It would involve going to the town meeting vote, getting a warrant article to start a capitalization fund. And then if there's free cash available, which there might be this year, funding it with something to see if the town would vote to approve to start funding it, and maybe adding a little bit to it each year. So I was going to just see what the feeling was from advisory.
Do you know, is this commonly done in other municipalities in the state?
Quite a few towns do have capital stabilization funds. And that's one of the things that as a small group we could look into.
And ultimately the funding source would be free cash, right? Just like with the other, we would just basically vote to transfer money from free cash into this stabilization fund. So you're still using free cash to buy these things. It's just a slightly better way to use the free cash, essentially.
It's a way of putting free cash aside and letting it earn something.
Yeah.
When we wrote the finance policy, a best practice was to have a capital replenishment fund, not so much stabilization, but replacement fund. And the means to fund that came from the high capital use departments because they were the ones that would benefit from then compared to the low capital. And there was a surcharge, like you were prepaying for your police cruiser each year by funding that. And that's, from my research, was the best municipal practice to funding this than to use free cash, which we've gotten ourselves noted on audits in the past from using free cash, which lowered our net fund balance, which from the auditor's perspective is not favorable.
So Peter, then in that scenario, does the fund come out out of the operating budget for those departments?
In the best practice scenario, yes. So the police department, the fire department, DPW, the school department would fund their replacement. It was a capital replacement fund, knowing that they're on a schedule to replace equipment after the useful life, and they prepay for it that way. That was, and I think we left part of that theme in the fiscal policy.
So if I could jump in, so I'm a fan of trying to do something like this. I guess I think of it as really just a way of saving ahead of time for small predictable purchases and saving the debt capacity for the much larger purchases, some of which are predictable, some of which perhaps aren't, but to save the debt capacity and not be doing borrowing for the small predictable things like a police cruiser. So that strikes me as a very appealing idea, especially as I see the debt service numbers going up and up and up, and seems like it could be valuable to save debt capacity for the larger project. So it strikes me as a very appealing way to do a little bit of pre-funding and saving in anticipation of the completely predictable smaller expenses. On Peter's point, I see the logic of wanting to have individual departments that are the large capital users be the funders. It seems like actually implementing that and operationalizing that could get somewhat complicated in terms of what would their budget requests be to cover their contributions to the replacement fund. And so just as the other stabilization funds that the town has get funded from free cash, seems like a possible alternative would be to, when free cash is available, use some of that to fund it, and to have Capital Budget Committee and advisory manage the process by looking ahead and seeing that if a new police cruiser needs to be purchased next year, that the capital budgets and operating budgets reflect and account for the fact that that may well be funded from a capital stabilization fund. So I think the concern that Peter raises perhaps could be managed through the work of advisory and the Capital Budget Committee.
And each year at town meeting, or prior to town meeting, we decide how to fund the capital. And free cash was one option. Excluded debt was a favorable option because it raises our taxing ability. So in effect, we are doing it each year. It's just to systemically do it through a fund, which has redeemable qualities and is best practice.
It's a way of setting aside a little bit of money for the completely predictable capital, the small and completely predictable capital items.
It's also a way that capital budget might be able to say, look, we have $350,000 that's available for use, and another way to help prioritize who gets the money.
And
Yeah.
do we
I know
know
some-
that, essentially creating a stabilization fund, putting free cash into it, and then using that for capital purchases? And I think this gets down to nobody fully understands S&P's criticism of how we've been using our free cash and running a deficit. But is this is this an activity that would be looked upon favorably, negatively, or neutrally by S&P? Or do we?
My impression is this would be a favorable fiscal policy. I mean, showing some fiscal responsibility. I think the concerns that we had is there was a year that we spent over $1 million. It was like 1.7 million in free cash on items, maybe 17 or 18 that they were spending a significant amount of purchases that was free cash, and that exhausted a lot of the free cash. And I think, we came up and that used a lot of our free cash. Since then, we've been much more conservative. They also don't want to see free cash for operating expenses. I think that if we look and say we have been putting 100,000 to OPEB, 100,000 to general stabilizations, we've been paying our snow and ice, 300,000 on snow and ice and unpaid bills. We probably have been using 600,000 maybe of free cash out of we were 1.2 something or 1.6 last year. That is a very conservative use where we all know we're not going to get the discussion of cash and free, but I think we've been very responsible. And if we're looking to just say we're going to put 100,000, 50,000 in a capital stabilization fund, if free cash was at a high number, then I don't think that's something that's going to be a red flag or something that would be unfavorable for us. If we're showing that this is the planning and this is the mode we're going to shift, this is something that I would envision taking at least an 8 to 10 year plan to build up and actually before it's fully functioning. But my purpose tonight was to try and bring it up to see if there's any interest in having advisory look into it. The warrant closes this Friday. We'd have to put a placeholder in, and you can always remove the placeholder, but if we don't get it on this year, we're stuck waiting a whole nother year before town meeting could even look at it. So if it's of interest, great. And if it's not, then that's fine.
Who would be sponsoring this article? Would it be you? Would it be the select board?
That's something I'd have to find out. I don't mind if it's something I was bringing up, if I knew I had support of advisory. And I think it would actually be the select board presenting it on behalf of the treasurer or whoever else.
Yeah.
I'd have to.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. What does everybody else on advisory think? I mean, I think that it makes sense to have a mechanism like this. How it gets funded, I suppose, is still up in the air. I mean, I can understand Peter's point about having the high use departments fund it, but ultimately that just means increasing their operating budgets, which means increasing taxes. Everybody's operating budget ultimately is paid for by the taxpayers, right? So
right.
I think that there is a reasonable argument that we use too much excluded debt, and that the real cost of running this town is, like, when we borrow, we shouldn't exclude it from the levy calculation, right? So it whatever we need to spend should be in the omnibus, right? So I think that there's an argument to be made there, but I think that given that the way that our town tends to function is using free cash and stabilization funds and excluded debt, creating a vessel which fits into the general fiscal ethos of how this town runs probably makes sense to me.
Yeah, one word of caution for how you said. We have to separate the concept from the application. The concept, I think we could get agreement. The application, once you go beyond 1 or 2 years, that tends to become very difficult because that requires forethought, planning, beyond multiple cycles of committees of advisory committee members, of select board members, of other elected officials. So that becomes more challenging in scoping out that we have to save for 8 to 10 years before we start to use it.
Oh, no, I think we should start using it probably within year 3. I just felt it would not be fully functional, as in all the small items that are coming up, like the $16,000 one, or even the $80,000 engineering study. Those are the items that would be nice to say, oh, we have this capital stabilization fund. I think it would take putting in $50,000 to $100,000 over so many years to have it be where we could every year fund these things. But if you put 100 this year, but if it's a good year of free cash and we say, oh, we've got enough to put 100,000 in this year, great, and 100, maybe 50,000 next year, or depending on how maybe the utility comes through and we get the windfall from the utility payment, maybe another 100,000 goes in. And then if we have a $50,000 police car purchase by year 3, we could already use this capital stabilization fund for that purchase. So I think you can start taking some money out sooner, but I think it would take 8 to 10 years to be a fully robust in and out type of where we could routinely look at funding small items. And it's, it's something I just want to see if people want to look into it, and we can try and talk to other towns, fine. But if there's,
I mean, I wonder also, this could be scalable and expanded as well, right? I mean, there's no particular limit to the size and the size, what, how much is in the fund, and then how much you could pull out at any given time, right? Because I know that I think it was last year, I see Shanklin is on the meeting right now. I don't know if he's paying attention to us or if he's on another meeting right now, but I want to say it was like last year or 2 years ago that I believe Sean had also floated the possibility of something like this, but for town building capital replacements. And I'm just wondering if this is the same idea, and we're just rehashing it and then seeing once again if there's enough political will to back this up. But I don't know if Sean is.
Yeah, I think it's a little different. If he's on here, great, he can talk about it. I thought what he was doing was combining the different, like to have one budget that in operating that was used for town buildings, or rather than having multiple, like each year
Sean,
having something.
Sean, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you think I wasn't paying attention?
I know that sometimes you are in multiple meetings at the same time. So
I was on a couple earlier. Board of Health was on. It was intriguing. Well, Peter could probably speak to that as well, because we talked about that at length in some capital meetings, but we couldn't really make that work actually legally on the buildings replacement thing. It was we tried to tailor it to what commercial buildings do, and it didn't really fit into the municipal finance world, and we couldn't get any traction with that. Not so much with your committee, but legally or bond wise.
What was the hurdle that couldn't be jumped over on that? Because if it's a fund that we are sort of just prepaying into using free cash or whatever other funds are available from the general fund, that you could subsequently draw from for your, annual town building needs, as outlined by the on-site insight report, what would stop you from doing that?
So it was very much, again, this is a year ago, we really went through this, but my recollection is that we were struggling with, there's some specific language in the town meeting and the laws in Massachusetts, at least, that dictate the town meeting had to approve certain items. Town meeting couldn't just approve basically a blanket fund. It needed to go somewhere, and this wasn't something that fit into like the revolving fund. That's what we were trying to do, was kind of mimic the revolving funds. But those work kind of on their own fund, on their own cash. Where this was 100% fund, we couldn't really do it because town meeting needed to basically approve the specific projects or list of projects.
See.
Yeah, I do recall the concept was appealing. It was the mechanics. And now that you mentioned the revolving fund and town meeting having a vote to get the language correct was the obstacle, because it was apples and oranges of being able to put money in and then spend it, particularly for buildings as the need comes up. The roof blew off, you needed it. There's money to spend on it. No, you had to wait until town meeting to get approval to replace the roof that blew off. And I'm just using that as an example.
And I recall this committee not really being all that fond of it either.
Wasn't there kind of a self-funding? If I'm recalling correctly, Sean, wasn't there a concept that surplus equipment, or is that something different, would be sold and then that money would be used?
No, that's something different. You're
That's the revolving fund, right?
That was the revolving fund for
Okay.
for equipment,
Okay.
mostly that was going to auction. Those were two different things, but
Okay.
but this was some of the similar conversations, I think, because you couldn't really get it. Not that we didn't want to get into the granular level, but we couldn't really see how the out years would lie. The language wouldn't really allow it at the time. We couldn't get legal counsel to really wrap their hands around it. It was pretty tough because not too many towns in Massachusetts had done something similar. So I don't know that it's not doable, but we pretty much ran out of time last year to go after.
And Sean, is that particular to buildings, or do you think those same constraints would apply to spending, paying for a piece of equipment, a police cruiser or something?
I think it would be different for a cruiser. The buildings were, and again, I'm not convinced it's not doable, but the buildings, a cruiser is much more, it's not more simple, but it's going to be almost a reoccurring. It's not that much different. The building might be a roof on one building and a heating system in a different building and, gutters on another building. It's pretty broad, the scope of what we might be going after. Not that it's not laid out in a plan. And the purpose was to take a plan that's pretty well laid out across 5, 6, 7 buildings and just adopt the plan and throw money at it each year. And you can assess it however you want. You can audit it however you want, but you'd always be throwing a certain number of at it, and it wouldn't come up as a surprise each year. That's very similar to the cruisers. We pretty much have it slated where we go 2 cruisers, 1 cruiser, 2, with exception a couple times we didn't, but I think that's why the cruisers we went from, I can't remember which direction we went. We went from, it used to be in the budget till we took it out, or vice versa.
Well, I don't know if this is part of what the legal issue was, but I'm generally in favor of this idea. But one potential downside I could see is if we don't have enough process around how money in that capital fund, once it's established, would get approved, for usage. And I don't know if that was part of the issue before, Sean, where, if there were not a a thoughtful process for spending the money once it's in the fund, I could see a situation where it could become a little bit of a free-for-all. And I don't know, without approval by, say, the capital budget committee or a similar committee or.
Heidi, isn't it the case that spending from the fund would have to be approved by town meeting, or is that not?
Yes. No, this would be a trust fund. This would be just like our general stabilization fund where we voted to spend 150,000 for trees. You would have to have a town meeting vote for any of the capital items. So it's a very defined product that you're looking at to use. And it's when you kind of like, if it was Pine Hill HVAC, the $16,000, it would be, you could fund it from free cash, you could borrow it, or you could fund it from the capital stabilization account. It would require a town meeting vote, cannot be used throughout the year as another account to use money from.
Zach Ward has his hand up. If you can go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I just want to chime in for a second. I think this is a really good conversation. I'm not sure what the parameters are for the town building expenses, but I do know that, for instance, our ambulance revolving fund in Sherborn, just like it was in many towns, was originally created literally to fund capital purchases, i.e. to buy an ambulance every few years. And I know of fire departments that still use it that way, and I know of fire departments that I think use it to actually buy not only ambulances, but fire trucks as well. For capital purposes. Again, it's sort of a savings account because as you all well know, the fire department in particular is a big capital heavy department. So I do know that those things are out there. I just wanted to throw that out there because again, we basically did have that in Sherborn, and Deb can correct me if I'm wrong. I know she was there, but that ambulance fund, now it funds half the operating budget, or around half, but it used to just be for buying an ambulance. And again, that would go to a town meeting vote.
Deb, you had raised your hand and lowered it again. I assume, did you want to say something, or was it covered by someone else?
I was just going to chime in about how the money can be spent. You can't just spend money out of that account. It has to go through town meeting. So it was kind of different, apples and oranges from what Sean was talking about on a town building account. It does have to go through town meeting vote to spend money.
Yeah, and so that was really my only concern. So I think since we've covered that, should we do like a straw poll and, get sort of advisory's feeling, and then if we're in favor, how you can go back and research what the warrant article would look like? Or is it too soon for that?
Yeah, but I mean, the warrant closes on Friday, right? You said so. Essentially, we have like 2 days to actually get a placeholder in there. So, I do think. I mean, I think the reason Heidi's bringing it up is because she needs us to voice our support or non-support for it, I think.
Right. I said I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to put the placeholder in. I just want to make sure that it's worthwhile going through the exercise.
All right, so let's just do a very quick straw poll. I'll just do a roll call. Like, you can kind of say yes, generally in favor, undecided, or not in favor. Dan?
I'm generally in favor.
Yeah. Steve?
Generally in favor.
Brendan already said yes. Peter?
In favor.
All right, Mark?
In favor.
Jane?
In favor.
Nat? Wasim?
Yep, in favor.
Yeah, and I'm also in favor of it. So, so I would say, Heidi, if you have the ability, or Deb, I guess, I don't know if this is finance department, treasurer, or just somebody needs to tell the select board to just put a placeholder into the warrant, and then we can flesh that out later.
Yeah, we can talk to him tomorrow.
If we can find a town that has a successful fund that we want to mimic, that gets us where we need to be. That, you know, build or buy, or build or borrow. I'd rather borrow a successful plan, and there may or may not be any in Massachusetts, but there probably is some fund that we can model or use as a base to develop what we conceptually want.
I'd second that. That seems like a really good approach.
Well, do you want me to work with my liaisons in the next 2 weeks or so to see if we can come up with something and present back in a couple weeks?
Yeah, I think that probably works. You know, and I think it would be helpful to figure out like all of the various mechanisms that in which a fund like this, one, could be funded, and then two, could be paying for capital projects or items, you know. Because if I recall correctly, I think, you know, the reason why advisory was not either not in favor or undecided with the sort of town building stabilization situation was that the process was still the same as the regular capital process, which was, you know, you have to bring it to advisory, then capital budget, then town meeting, and then there's a whole specific project that you have to lay out and with the amount of money, and then we approve it. And so the process was kind of the same. So we were sort of like, well, why would we have to go through the exact same process, but now just have this fund as opposed to just straight up borrowing the money? And I guess that same question would apply for why wouldn't we just do it the normal way for the police car also? And I suppose that the answer is simply that we can set aside that free cash and have it earn a little bit of interest as opposed to not earn any interest. And so I guess that argument would apply to the usage of this for smaller town building capital projects as well, right?
Heidi or Deb, one thought that came up is there may be some subject matter expert at the Division of Local Services at the state level that could steer us or scope out existing plans or municipalities that have mechanisms like this. And go right to the state. They would probably have a good idea of what's working and what's not working out of the 360 towns and cities.
Right. Yeah, I actually just sent Heidi a chat too. I work with that consultant all the time, and she works with a number of communities, and I can check with her to see if she, you know, is familiar with any of the communities that use it as well. So
right.
Yeah.
And just get their warrant article and we'll change the name.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deb. Sean, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I did actually just remember one of the benefits that we were trying to convey before, but I don't think it really came across. So if you think about the whole process while everyone's still here, the intent was, even though the upfront process was still going to be basically the same, you know, we got to go to capital budget, we go in with a number, it gets vetted, you know, say we throw just round numbers, say you throw 100,000 a year at it. Some years you'll throw 150. You kind of know what's coming down because it's in the plan. One thing that was going to benefit is it would all fall into one bucket rather than, sorry, I thought that ringer was off. Rather than having an FY21 and an FY22 and an FY23 fund out there that would all just be, say, call it town buildings budget or town buildings fund. And, you know, there might be 6 or 8 projects ongoing. And then as they flush out, and say they close, there's the tail end process where Heidi's constantly, or the treasurer's constantly calling, all right, are you done with that project? Okay, I need to close it out because I need to group all these in short-term borrow. And then if you're completely done, then I need to, you know, I'm going to go to long-term in June or whatever it is. So they're coming in at random times because nothing I do revolves around fiscal year, right? It just doesn't. Construction doesn't, building construction doesn't. So the fiscal's just kind of halfway through my year, but who cares? Because the fund is going to get money up front. It's going to get money in July. And at the tail end, when projects finish, they leave. They're cleared out. You know, finance is tracking it in its own little subcategory, and then it takes off and it starts getting borrowed against. And it's financed, and then, you know, 5-10 years from now, we finish paying for it. So it was it somewhat followed the progression. We couldn't really find anyone that was doing exactly that, but you know, that's similar to what any businesses are doing, right? They're just tracking their capital through. It doesn't line up necessarily with fiscal, but you can easily track any project you want, any way you want. That was what we were trying to do, to help everyone on the front end and the back end.
And do you think that this capital stabilization fund that Heidi's proposing could be implemented in that way to help you out in town buildings?
If we can, yes, I think it could.
It's not fundamentally different from what you were proposing a year ago.
No, it's not.
Okay. Okay, so I think Heidi, I would say between you and Deb, you guys can handle getting a placeholder in there, and you can work with the finance type liaisons and try to flesh something out.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right. Anybody else have any other questions or comments regarding debt service and capital issues? All right, I think that's all we need from you, Heidi. Oh, it does look like we lost Brendan Daly at about 9:30. All right. Our last thing then is just approving the minutes from the last meeting, which was December 1. Let's see here. All right, so these are the draft minutes by Peter. Did anybody have any edits on these minutes? I don't think this is how you spell Zachary for Zachary Ward. Zach's still here.
Throwing an H there.
E-H-A, right?
There you go.
All right. Any other changes? All right. With no other changes, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as amended on screen?
I move to approve the minutes as amended on screen.
Second.
All right, let's vote. Dan?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Jane?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Natalie? Natalie? Oh, all right, got an aye there. Wasim?
Aye.
All right, I'm also an aye. So the Minutes pass unanimously. And now can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
All right. Let's roll call vote that as well. Dan,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Jane,
Aye.
Peter,
aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Natalie,
Aye.
Wasim,
Aye.
and I'm also an aye. 9:36. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. See you guys next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Steve.